Hi, Kevin.
Good morning, sir.
I want to ask if you're doing well because I know you're doing well by how bright your little smile is this morning. You and I are super excited. Today is a family reunion. We've got long lost sister from the state of Maryland coming to join us today. Before I do a rather lengthy introduction slash tribute to our longtime friend, Shelley Lombardo, I thought it would be cool for us to offer any updates on what's going on in our beloved mountain area that was hit so hard with the hurricane. I know you were directly involved on the ground in your native Ashe County surrounding areas. Can you tell us a little bit about that effort and some of the things you saw?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's one of those times that you wonder if the media is finding those like the worst spots and making it look worse than it is, and got up there and it's just as bad as anticipated. So I'd heard that enough rain fell in that county to cover the entire state of North Carolina with 2 feet of water in 12 hours, and so obviously, if you were in the low lying areas, it was a incredible amount of water flowing through the valleys, and so it obviously washed up roads, bridges, homes, etc. So it's going to be a long ride, but the initial phase that I was really involved in, and by the way, like I couldn't thank my team at Solero and also just like a broadened spectrum of people who donated to help us there because we ended up raising like $30,000. And I think Travis first put up $1,000, by the way. And so we just blew past that. I think we were able to supply like 6,000 meals via those donations from friends and family and Solero team members. So really cool. We took supplies up, and that was kind of in the phase of meals and insulin and baby formula. And now, people are really focusing a lot on like temporary bridges so people can get to the road from their homes or farms. The 2-year plan is going to be very much around just rebuilding. They're resilient people. There's no question about that. They're tough, they're resilient, they're optimistic, and they are very much great neighbors. And so there was the thing that like really lifted me up about it was just community and how people were lifting each other up and helping each other out. And people put aside like their own jobs, their own careers, their own livings to go help their neighbors. And I wouldn't have expected anything different, but it was certainly uplifting to see that spirit.
I've described how my team, my family, we're all kind of grieving because this area is so special to us. And I was talking to my team, Jess, our producer today. We've got a little cadre of Appalachian State graduates and some UNC Asheville graduates. Both of those schools were in the path. And so we've done a little fundraiser. There's some designs we've done on some merchandise to help raise money for the respective universities' disaster relief funds. For me, like seeing people suffer and how everyone, all stripes, is kind of rallying around these communities and getting back to our humanity and our shared existence. I was talking with a prospective client the other day, and he's in the HVAC space, and he lives in North Carolina, 6 hours away from all that action. He's taking crews up to the mountains to install whole HVAC systems, in homes and churches and buildings, like just labor of love.
Everybody comes together. Like that's the one thing that everybody pile in to help each other out. That's something I love. It definitely was very apparent when I went up there, and that was like really uplifting to Travis and Jason and my son Aiden and I.
Well, we'll continue to talk about this. This is going to, people say, yeah, a few weeks, few months. This is going to be years, making sure everybody's taken care of up there. But it's going to happen, and we'll keep talking about it. Well, let's talk about our beloved guest. Shelley Lombardo is a force of nature. We all started our careers together working for a regional bank based in Durham, North Carolina. And we were all kind of in the Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem area. And when I met Shelley, I guess, Kevin, you were our boss. Shelley's one of those people you could tell that she would be running the world by now or much sooner. And it all came true. About 14 years ago, around the same time my career pivoted, yours did too, where you took the chief operating officer job at the place that's become your mission and passion professionally, Evergreen Advisors, one of the leading investment banks in the country, based in the greater Baltimore area. I've been impressed. I enjoy following you on social media. You're not the kind of person that I think some people like to join everything and be on every board. It looks like you strategically choose operations that you're especially passionate about. Cybersecurity industry, being there at the seat of federal government, I know is so important. Your leadership there. I definitely want to, during the course of this conversation, cover some of the work you're doing in the exit planning space as well. I think that's a critical service that you and other leaders have banded together in your nonprofit vehicle to help folks there. But doing all of that while raising a beautiful family, 4 children. So, ladies and gentlemen, now you get to hear about the woman behind all that legend I just read about, Shelley Lombardo.
Yes, thank you.
It's so great to see you. So, last 14 years, if I have the math right, first as Chief Operating Officer, now President of Evergreen Advisors. Tell us about the scope of your work and what you enjoy doing there.
First, I'll tell you how I got into it. And when I was thinking about that, and you were going to talk about this, Kevin, it brought back memories of you. Do you remember when you first interviewed me? We were at some bar in North Carolina, and there was this like video game. And you were like, if you beat me at this video game, you got the job.
I forgot.
Not sure what the job's going to be. Not sure what I'm going to be doing, but I'm going to have a job, right? As long as I can win this video game. That was the premise. And so coming full circle to Evergreen, I was in banking, looking to do something different. I've met the founder of Evergreen Advisors, Rick Core, at this small bagel place, like on the side of the road, right? And he's in there. There were no video games, but he was like, at the time I had an offer from a large public company here in the region. And he's like, why don't you come work with me and help grow the firm? And I'm like, not knowing what that's going to be, right? Not knowing what we were going to be doing. And I took that risk. And I'm so glad every day that I did, because every day I get to help companies grow. That's it, every day. So it's such a joy. So we're an investment bank and a corporate advisory firm. So investment banking, sell side M&A. On the corporate advisory side, we do business valuations. What's the business worth? We do outsourced CFO work. So helping companies grow until they need a full-time CFO. We do site selection for companies that are looking to grow and expand jobs, investments, and capital. And then we have a consulting group where we manage a couple venture funds. So every day, everything's kind of under that growth spectrum. And I get to do that. So I'm very fortunate. But because I took the risk, I played the video game initially. And I said yes to a position, again, that I didn't know what I was going to be walking into.
The good thing is he nor I took any risk. So that's the cool thing is, I think he probably recognized the same thing I did, is that you are a lot smarter than probably either of us and incredibly talented and energetic and determined. Not a risk on our side. And I probably threw that video game to be sure you did take the job.
But yeah, that was just something I remember, right? Like as both positions, I didn't know what I was going into, right? I was an English major in college. That was my major. So going into banking, going into finance, completely different. But I took the risk.
What I was thinking about as we prepared for this, interestingly, was you created a little bit of a template for my career. So I was obviously that was my first meaningful leadership position, and obviously had great, incredibly talented people on our team. And that's what's crazy, is how much talent we had on that little team. What I recognize is that having that person that you could trust 100% and that you had full belief in, and that you knew would have your back and you knew was smart enough to carry the message and the culture and the vision and the strategy forward and help develop those things, is like really, really helpful for like a CEO. And I recognized as I was thinking about this, I was like, man, you didn't have this title, but you were the chief of staff. You were that chief of staff, and you were that person that like I could count on above anyone else. And I recognize that as I look at my days at Paymentech, as I look at my days starting Innovia, and then my days here at Solero, like I've maintained that template of having that person I could count on. So thank you for providing that template.
I think we were very fortunate, right? All of us very fortunate in our career with your leadership. it's all the components that make a great team, right? Like in terms of the people, the talent, it's the culture around the team, right? That was phenomenal. And you're not always fortunate to have that.
What I've noticed, and you've just illuminated it for me in the first few minutes of this conversation, that my experience with working with Kevin wasn't unique even at the time. Your domains of expertise that you've developed are so opposite from mine, kind of technically and in execution through the years. But at your core, leave the canvas kind of open for us. Kevin told me, he said that he figured out pretty quickly that I was dangerous when I got bored. I don't think those are your exact words, but that was the sentiment that he would try to like have ideas and things where I could just kind of exert influence. And I think that's what I'm hearing that he gave you and that you've learned to give other people as a result. I think I've observed that in multiple people you've worked with, Kevin, at the companies where I've intersected with you since. And I've tried to be that way with with all the people that work for me. I think it's having that kind of creative freedom with your role at a company. That I've always liked the metaphor of putting your hand on the steering wheel. It kind of gives every person that feeling that they're kind of controlling the destiny to a degree.
I think the modern leader needs to think about reaching their vision via creating environments in which people are able to facilitate the best outcomes. It isn't anymore that you have to come up with every strategy and every vision yourself and just dictate the path and look for people to execute as minions, right? It's much more of like every layer of the organization should be heard, be valued, and have an opinion, and you should pull those through the organization and create, facilitate that outcome, facilitate that vision as a team. I think really early on, I think Shelley was talented at that because she had the rare combination of like, yeah, she was a little bit intimidating, which I loved, by the way. And I could send her out on missions and she was going to accomplish them. But she was also like someone that everyone trusted going to. And I think she's maintained that through her whole career. Because when I read things on social media, that's the one thing she creates a collaborative environment that people feel valued. And I think like when you combine the level of IQ that she has, which is just off the charts, but she was born with that part. But combining that with like the natural leadership ability to make people feel seen and heard, like that's a special combination, right?
I love it how you said pull through, because a lot of times I feel like every day, I'm moving boulders. That's my role. Like if I can go in, what can I do to make this happen for this team, for this initiative, right? How can I remove the boulders for you? But I love the term pulling it through and ensuring that, folks are able, as Brian said, to have that creativity and then to come up with that map themselves. And then I can just help them pull it all the way through the organization.
At what point in your career did you just decide I'm going to go for it? Because I think like we all go into our careers and we're like, we'll see what happens. Like, I don't know what level I'm going to end up at. I don't know what I'm going to want to do. I don't know how much commitment I'm going to want to give to this. And I was just curious, like at what point did you decide, yeah, I'm going for it?
I think it was when I played that video game and I decided I wasn't going to be an English teacher. I was all in from that point on. I'm not someone that does things halfway. I'm either all in or I'm not in, right? Like that's every organization I'm in, anything that I volunteer with. I'm either all in or I'm just not. So yeah, I'd say for the career, since that was really my first job out of college, it was that video game. I'm going to win it.
I think you remember when I would say like I was going to be a CEO and people would laugh up in the bank because I just was like, I'm just going to say it out loud because like the only way to get there is to like own it and just state it and drive towards it.
I've been trying to ask you through multiple technical difficulties about how you got so involved in the cybersecurity industry. I've noticed that that's a particular point of passion for you. So tell us how that came about and why it's so important to you.
Yeah. So about 6 years ago, had a realization that about 40% of our client base was in the cyber industry. So started dip my toes in there for the benefit of them. And then, as I got more ingrained in it, right? Every company's actually involved in cyber. You are, Kevin is, right? We all are, right? It's all cyber is a thread that runs between us all. And so understanding that we need to move forward this industry so that, people aren't afraid of it. They can get more involved, that we can get more practitioners involved. That was something that I felt very passionate about.
So, what's some of the work you do in that space in that organization?
Yeah, so I'm vice chair of the Cybersecurity Association. So we're a national nonprofit that is all about advocating cyber. So that could be anything from workforce development. It could be next week we're running a practitioners group because a lot of times there's practitioner groups for CISOs and large companies, but what about the middle market companies, right? What about the guy that's heading up IT, and there's one of him and there's, 400 people in the company, right? Who is he talking to? How is he getting the best practices? So being able to bring forward that information to the middle market, right, benefits our clients, benefits everyone in this region. So we do workforce, we do helping business grow, and then education as well, and then just overall connection.
Another of your extracurriculars that I found interesting, I think it's so critical where you're working with MIPS, Maryland Industrial Partnerships, and kind of at that nexus of university, communities, and industry. Tell us about your work there.
So I first got started. So the passion came in creation of jobs, creation of revenue. Before MIPS, I served as the chair of the Emerging Tech Council in Baltimore City. And our sole purpose there was creating jobs and revenue for the city. Got asked to then be on the advisory board for MIPS, Maryland Industrial Partnership, which is very cool in Maryland. It's our tax dollars that are then funding grants that allow companies to utilize the university system within Maryland to get research done, to get something tested. Let's say you have a drone and you want to get tested in a wind tunnel to see what the payload can be. As a company, you can go to the University of Maryland, their professors and students, and we will help fund that research so that you as a company can come back and say, yes, it can support X on a payload, and therefore you can use that information. That was that's just one of my passions in terms of creating jobs and revenue. And it's really cool to see all these companies and where they're going and how they're growing.
Yeah, cybersecurity has just been such a defining piece of like everyone's ecosystem, and it used to
Yeah.
be just like the largest companies, but it's even down to like where we play in the SMB now. It's something that we focused a lot of our efforts on the last couple of years is not only ensuring that Celero itself is, appropriately secure, but also, the 55,000 small to mid-sized businesses that we serve. Like, how do we help them take that leap from payments, card security to also cybersecurity and ensuring that their business is as safe as possible. So it's an exploding field, and you've done some great work in it. So that's
And
very
it touches every business. We have a public company here in Maryland, Tenable, and one of the founders, Cindy Gula, a couple years ago, she's like, it'd almost be better if we called it data care versus cyber, right? Because cyber is kind of esoteric, it's scary, not realizing that at the end of the day, it's your data, right, that we're caring for. And I loved how she positioned that. And that's why it just touches every single thing that we do.
I think we're all kind of at an age and at a phase in our careers where you start thinking about the legacy you're going to leave. So, what would you like for people to say about your life's work when you're done?
Not just my work, but probably for me, it's she made things happen. That I found a way, that I would drive it forward, that I'd move something, like that's like every day. It doesn't matter with my kids. I always tell my kids that that's my legacy, right? Mom made things happen, right? You forgot your homework back in the day? No problem. We're gonna drive to someone's house and you're gonna do it on their doorstep with their book, or we're gonna take a picture of it and have it emailed, right? Whatever I do, I made things happen and didn't stand in the way of things.
I think mine is like a lot around leaving people like better than I found them, so I really enjoy the art of mentorship, and not that I'm the smartest or anything like that, but creating environments that people can grow in. That's something that I really love. So, frankly, when I look around at people like Shelly, that we work together and we had that opportunity to explore and develop like our abilities and our potential together. And then to see like her go on and accomplish so much and add so much value like that probably gives me more fulfillment than anything else. And seeing like people in my pathway that happens to is like something I really love. Shelly and I used to be pretty good together in interviews, by the way. We used to ask questions like this. We used to be a pretty scary interview.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it, right? We did. We gave some
Yeah,
great interviews. But look at the talent we found, right? And I think,
yeah, exactly.
your legacy is held true. Like you mentored some great folks and they've gone to some great places in their career. And I like to think it's all because, of what was started early on in their career.
So I have another question now that I know y'all used to do joint interviews. Is there any freaking way I would have gotten hired in the first place?
Yeah, I think so. Well, one of the things we tried to do is like just pelt people with questions that didn't jive. There was no rhyme or reason, and see if they could manage their emotions and stay calm, and you would have been able to handle that.
Yeah, it wasn't so much about the technical skills, it was more about the soft skills. And I think that's still true to this day, right? You can teach the technical. We can help you on the modeling skills, right? But if you don't have those soft skills to begin with, that creativity, the desire to learn, that's something we can't teach. But it gave us that insight of whether you're just going to sit there and look at us and go, no way. Well, is that what you would do in front of a client? Is that what you would do in the face of a problem or a hurdle, is just stare at it blankly? Or would you give it a shot, give it a try?
I have these realizations. The person behind the curtain, Jess, producing us today, we had a client that was a little bit out of shape the other day. If you look at Jess on paper on her resume when she came out of Appalachian State to us a couple of years ago, there's nothing on her resume or anything we talked about in the interview that would tell you that she's a walking case study in empathy and just immediately goes into the client's shoes and solves the problem efficiently. And probably the greatest thing she taught me this week, because I didn't have this when I was 23, 25 years old, that accountability. My legacy, y'all didn't ask because you're not curious about my legacy. My legacy, when I die, I want people to say, like, he tried to take care of people. Like, just try to take care of people. Like, whether it was solving a problem or running a creative agency, I'm like the king misfit toy out of all the misfit toys. And I feel like creative people need to be kind of taken care of a little bit. Like, here's a place where y'all can come play and be weird and come up with fun, creative stuff. And so I take that. It's kind of an extension of how I approach my own family with taking care of my wife and my son or my parents. It's just kind of a driving ethos.
So whether I'm helping someone make something happen to get where they need to be or how they need to feel or whatever it is that they need, right? Or Kevin, you're investing in people to help them grow. Like it's all very similar, but it comes back to the reason why it worked so well so long ago. My resume didn't say finance. I was an English major, right? It didn't say finance. Traits I have you wouldn't have seen on the resume. And that's those interviews are so important.
I was saying we could have an entire podcast just on interviewing styles, couldn't we, Shelley?
Yes. Well, I mean, I think that's
How
been the
you?
thread of this whole podcast. We look at the leadership, right? Culture, the interviewing, right? That's
I
where it all
think
started for us.
I know that all of us believe it all comes down to the people that you surround yourself with, and that can't just be good people. It has to be talented people with a ton of potential and IQ and ability to do the job. Like when we moved to Nashville, we started talking about like you have to be able to play your instrument to the ground. So whatever that might be, technology, operations, finance, sales, but then you also have to be a good member of the band. And so it's that culture and how do you fit into the culture of the overall. Combining those two things, man, really allows organizations to be energized.
So I've developed what I think is probably intellectual property in the interviewing space. I'm going to try to get some kind of patent or trademark or copyright. I don't even know which type of property I want to get. But I start every interview now and been doing this for a few years. When the person comes on Zoom, I'll say there are two looming questions. Why do you want to talk to me? Why do I want to talk to you? I'll go first if you want. And that's where I start every call. And what it usually unearths for me, I don't want anybody ever darkening the door of Park Life if they're not intellectually curious about the work we do and who we do it for, especially. So that tells me very quickly if they've done their homework. And most people do.
It is, but I want them more than just intellectually curious about what we do. I want them to then, I want them to, it's one thing to understand what the task you need to do. It's another thing to anticipate, be curious about what the outcome of that is.
Yeah.
Here's A to get to B. Okay, well, I want them thinking about C and D. How does this fit into the greater picture? that's, that takes some time for folks to understand the broader, that it's okay if Jess can ask about, well, what does this mean for the holistic part of their business?
Yeah.
Is this a revenue line that's really going to be driving the business? Or are we working for a subsidiary or something that's smaller, that's not a part of their core?
Yep. I love that. And I try to go, and from the other side, I try to go, I want to find out how different they are. I'm usually not trying to add the exact same kind of firepower I have. Like, even if I am, I want somebody with a different perspective, like either from working with different kinds of clients or just a different artistic perspective, even. I'm just trying to figure out what that difference maker or set of difference makers are.
That's not talked about enough either. It's like, I want people to be very different in the perspectives they bring to the table, but then very alike in the way that they lead others. And so that's a hard combination to find. If you don't lead people in a very similar manner, like you're not going to be at this company, so like that's where I don't want difference. I want people who like see people, hear people, value people. And as I said, the pull through, like I really do care about ensuring that every team member here is getting mentored and is getting heard and valued.
How have you kind of ingrained that into your culture there?
Yeah, I mean, it has to happen in the interview process, not to go back to our interviews, but you can't you can't change that personality. Like I think like finding those leaders who can have that personality trait where they actually do care about the team members, that goes, you can almost solve everything else if they truly care about their team and the customer.
Do you think it all boils down to what we've talked about a lot, which is the respect, humility, empathy? Is that kind of the core?
I think it's a combination of that and the intellectual capacity though, because it's not like, I will say, like, even in the beginning of my career, I thought like, grit, I still think is one of the most important traits, but grit and perseverance. But, I do think as we've gotten more technologically enabled, and then, the intellectual capacity is very important as well. So it's a combination of like that personality of the empathy, humility, like non-entitlement, willing to work really hard for it, care about others, plus the actual intellectual potential. How about you, Shelley?
Yeah, I call it emotional intelligence, but it's their ability. It's the same thing, right? It's the same characteristics. That's key. And we as an organization years ago went through kind of a process of identifying everyone's emotional intelligence. And it was fascinating, right? Like you have people that are amazing producers, right? They're leaders, right? But they lack that emotional intelligence. So it's like you have this team that's rowing a boat and you got one person walking through the, like a paddle boat and they're just knocking all the paddles, right? Because they aren't understanding what everyone's going through.
That's part of that template, by the way, I was talking about earlier that you helped me learn, and which has been like a really big part of, me finding success, is having that team around me that I can really trust. But that EQ is a big part of that. I have a chief of staff now named Abigail who's really good at that. And I think that the core function that she is able to play is to enable conversations and communication amongst the C team to occur without friction. And that high level of EQ is a core factor in like reducing friction. I think as AI and like other technologies persist and evolve through like our daily lives, like that EQ is going to be the one factor that's really, really important and the most valuable of all.
Yeah, I mean, AI at the end of the day is a tool, right? Like that's going to be a tool. It makes what we do better, but it's never going to take the place of the emotional intelligence ever. Now, is your team, Kevin, is it a lot of it remote or are they all in office or?
We're
Because
about
it's like,
75-25. A lot depends on the role itself. So, COVID was a good opportunity for us to see how those different departments performed in a work from home function. And we have degradation of service in some of the support areas and other areas. And then we had no degradation of service in like our developers.
do you find it in terms of thinking about communicating your values, right? And how you want the leadership team and what, the culture of the company. Do you find that it's harder now to like if you're not all in the office or
Much more difficult. Yeah,
yeah.
I think it's much more difficult because someone like trying to decide if they want to stay or go to a new company, as example, like they have the same office, same lunch, same commute, if they're working from home, it doesn't, the office culture isn't obviously as important. So I think you have to be very creative in employing like your core values to those people. But I think the biggest area I see it hurting is, young, high potential professionals they learn so much by being between the meetings. It's not what
Right.
happens in the meeting, but it's the conversations. Here's why I said that, or I was mad about this, or I was happy about this, and here's why. And just learning, as you're walking towards your desk or the coffee or whatever, that there's just so much intricate detail that is missed in a work from home for young
Or
professionals.
even like thinking when, we were going back to us again, right? And you're able to see situations like, if somebody did something successful or, not successful, whatever it was, you got to see kind of how it all worked out around it. Versus now it's like, somebody hits a successful milestone, you post it somewhere and there's no other conversation about it. So nobody
Right.
learns from it, learns how it was achieved or learns what the aftermath was.
It's still difficult to see if that was genuine or not either when you post things, like we see a massive difference in team engagement, based on who posts it and how they post it.
You guys met my daughter earlier and, she's in a remote environment. It's tough. It's tough, right? To see she can work really hard, but never see the true outcome of her work being put into something is tough.
And that varies by industry. Like I've been building a completely virtual company for a long time, and the plan is for it to always be like that. I have such respect for the challenge it puts on me to run the business, on every single person that works here. And that is one of the first things I talk about. Like, I'll just say, hey, we're virtual. The owner doesn't like putting on business clothes, and we don't have desires. For a while, people were, when do you think you'll have an office? I finally started saying, I don't think we are. So I'll tell people, I'll say, hey, this isn't for everybody. It's, you're going to find out real quickly if it's not. And we got to be honest about that. I said, but we make Herculean efforts. I don't think we realize it or process it that way. But if you looked at our operations on the communications front, we probably over communicate like crazy to try to compensate for that water cooler dynamic. We try to create as many virtual water coolers as we can. And I feel, could I do this better if I recruited a bunch of people in Charlotte to go to an office? Or, there's some benefits to having borderless talent.
It's relative to size as well, because I will tell you that I was very, like, I always felt like I could drag the culture in a way, right? Like, I just really like my team members, and I'm grateful for that because I don't have to try. But there was a place as Solero grew that I was like, okay, I can't drag the culture anymore. And that's when I started being a lot harder on my leaders. Like, I want the people that work, within my teams to be the best they can be. And so it's a combination of like, yeah, I care about you, but part of that caring is like, do your freaking best. But you can't pull that along without leadership at some point. So what you'll find, Brian, is when you layer, I don't know what that number is, 20, 50, when you get to that number, you're going to have a layer between you and some of the team members. And that's when the similarity of your leadership style will be very important for your culture to continue to permeate the way you want.
No, I'm actually trying to force that to happen earlier than it needs to, so that can be practiced and learned and developed when the stakes are lower. I don't always think that way, but on this stuff, I'm especially dialed in, and I kind of operate from a position of both hope and fear. I agree with you on all of that. And I do think, in an industry where you've got people who can do great work in bursts, have the freedom to go walk their dog when they want to, or go do anything they want and then come back. I've got people who do their best work at midnight. But it creates a 24/7 dynamic in some ways, the agency that never sleeps. Well, thank you both. Shelley, thank you for overcoming some technical difficulties. We've done this in a couple of virtual spaces because it was kind of a Rip Van Winkle effect for me, revisiting some memories and hearing some of the memories the two of you shared. Shelley, you predated me at that organization by about 6 or 7 months. And with how you acted when I came in, I would have guessed you were there 25 years. So
It's funny, you look back at the time we were there and it seemed like it was so much longer.
yeah. I mean, when Kevin inherited my little branch at Randleman Road, and then he was at my office helping me reach my full potential 2 days later. And Kevin, I think I told you this recently, but where Shelley, until this recent interaction, had been emblematic in my mind. We were driving to that leadership conference you sent us to in Raleigh. Shelley was pregnant with her first child and going through the morning sickness stuff. And so we're driving along on the interstate. I'm driving, and she just looks at me and says, "Pull over the car." So I just, no questions, I just pulled over. She opens the door, bah! And then pulls the door shut and goes, "Let's go." And I just went. And I probably proved a little bit of myself to you that day.
You did because you didn't, yes, because you got stuff done. You didn't like hem and haw and have to talk about it, and we just go.
That is why anyone should choose Shelley and her firm. I'm no kidding aside, all kidding aside, that is exactly who she is. I mean, she's going to get to the goal line, and things that would push a lot of people off to the side and not complete the task. Like, she doesn't even see them as an obstacle. Like, I would at least say they were an obstacle I overcome. She just does it, doesn't even think of it as an obstacle, just keeps going. I love that.
No, I live by this. We get one life, right? We get one. So none of them are obstacles, right? We just got to find a way around it, find a way to move to our goals. And with that mindset, right? It's just, you're just moving left, right, you're just moving around and just get to the goal line.
Thank you both. Thank you, Kevin, for being such a constant in my life. Shelley, thank you for disrupting it in such a great way once again. I always admired you, but I admire the person you've become and how dedicated you are to your family and your community. So I salute you, my friend.
Thank you.
Nice catching up with you, Shelley.
As well. Family reunion.
That's right.